Welcome back to GFR. The Marvel Cinematic Universe is in need of a major overhaul, and everyone knows it. Not only was The Marvels the lowest earning film in the entire franchise,
unbelievable,
but the character they've been setting up as their new big bad is for numerous reasons now basically DOA. Fortunately, the way to save Marvel is obvious, and all it takes is a two-pronged approach.
What?
Step 1, bring in the X-Men.
X-Men.
And make them the new villains of the Marvel Universe. Step 2, watch every episode of the animated series Invincible and copy its tone. Hold on, maybe we should take these one at a time. First, Marvel needs a new mega villain, and the X-Men should be it.
If I wanted to kill him, yes.
To make that happen, Marvel can use the Multiverse Saga as a way to pivot the entire universe. Pivot it and set up an Avengers vs X-Men film. Drop Kang and make the X-Men the new villains fighting the Avengers. An Avengers vs X-Men film would give the Multiverse Saga something to build to, other than everyone versus one big bad, like we just had with the Infinity Saga. This will be a multi-film event, the kind Marvel wants and needs. There would have to be at least one X-Men film put into production ahead of Avengers vs X-Men. More if Marvel wants to really take their time to build anticipation. This untitled X-Men movie could easily carry on from wherever Deadpool 3 leaves off and firmly establish mutants as existing somewhere in the Marvel multiverse before pitting them against the Avengers. Then, once all the pieces are set up, Marvel can hit fans with the absolute slobber knocker of an Avengers vs X-Men throwdown. Of course, Marvel will need to establish a reason for the X-Men and the Avengers to fight. For that, we turn to the 2012 Avengers vs X-Men comic event. The comic version of Avengers vs X-Men played out like a more personal civil war. The Phoenix Force, a nigh unstoppable power that was the driving force behind the Phoenix Saga and the Dark Phoenix Saga, is coming to Earth and is about to inhabit the body of young mutant Hope Summers. The X-Men want to protect Hope and train her to use the power for good to benefit the entire mutant race, while the Avengers want to take Hope into custody to study her and prevent the Phoenix Force from potentially destroying the Earth. The Marvel Cinematic Universe version probably wouldn't want to open the can of worms that is the Phoenix Force so early in the X-Men's tenure. However, that doesn't mean the central conflict of Avengers vs X-Men couldn't still easily revolve around a mutant child with the potential to either heal or destroy the world. In fact, dangerous powers could be the X-Men's whole dynamic in the MCU. Many fans have wondered what will separate the mutants from every other superpowered being in the MCU when they arrive. The answer will most likely be the dangerous nature of their powers. Rogue not being able to touch anyone without putting them in a coma or worse, outright killing them, is a lot different than gaining the ability to climb walls and jump really high.
Go flip! Yeah!
Not bad!
Mutants often have powers they can't control, like Cyclops when he doesn't have his visor, or Leech, who involuntarily cancels out the abilities of any super-powered being within 50 feet of him. The unpredictable and even dangerous nature of mutant powers versus the planned enhancements of many of Marvel's already established superheroes will most likely be what sets the mutants up as something people fear and hate in the MCU. Avengers vs X-Men could even stem from the world premiere superhero team, fearing mutants in general and wishing to study the entire race against its wishes. Eventually, the X-Men and the Avengers will need to stop fighting and team up. When they do, they need to team up against Mr. Sinister.
Through you, I shall give birth to the future.
Right now, there are strong rumours that the big bad for the first X-Men movie won't be someone familiar like Magneto. Instead, the villain may be Mr. Sinister, someone who has not yet appeared in any mutant movies. And Mr. Sinister is an ideal puppet master to be working behind the scenes to pit the X-Men and Avengers against each other. The hardest part of bringing the X-Men into the MCU is explaining why we suddenly have hundreds of characters with superpowers running around. Such an intro will need to explain where the mutants came from, why they've been hiding, and why they have now gone public. As it turns out, Mr. Sinister can help the X-Men movie with all three of these things. In the comics, Sinister is a long-lived genetic expert and mutant who has been doing mad science since the 19th century. It would make sense if the X-Men and other mutants somehow owed their powers to his genetic tinkering and his spreading the X gene. It would also make sense for mutants to lay low for fear of Sinister hunting them down and transforming them into his own mutant guinea pigs. If Sinister finds a way to weaponize enough mutants, he may pose a big enough threat to the world that it would make sense for Professor X to bury the hatchet with the Avengers to team up and stop him. One of the most ironic things about Mr. Sinister is that he will be far easier to introduce into the MCU than he would have been to introduce into the Fox films. That's because Sinister is intimately tied to certain characters. He has manipulated Cyclops' bloodline, cloned Jean Grey, and is obsessed with the idea that these two will one day give birth to the world's greatest mutant. Cyclops was all but ignored in the Fox movies, making it tough to bring in Sinister back then. Now, any background exposition on Sinister will only help us learn more about overlooked but beloved characters like Cyclops and Jean Grey. That means we get a scary villain intro that will also make the inevitable origin stories of our heroes a little more exciting for audiences.
Do you think your puny powers can affect me?
The last reason we want Mr. Sinister in an X-Men vs. the Avengers movie is that his campy tone will fit right in with the new direction Marvel needs to go in. And that tone should be the one already demonstrated by Invincible. That's right, we're back to the animated series Invincible. Invincible tries to embrace everything about superhero comics, including the kinds of bonkers plot lines where Superman had to marry a mermaid.
Wouldn't feel right to...
That's something Marvel has staunchly avoided in their movies, but now that more serious formula is getting tired. The Marvel Cinematic Universe needs to be a little sillier.
But we are not a joke, no matter what social media says.
James Gunn is perhaps the only MCU director to lean into that silliness, and his Guardians of the Galaxy 3 was the only Marvel film in 2023 that was a commercial and critical success. Mr. Sinister is the perfect behind-the-scenes evil to fit right into that new silliness. From the very beginning, this villain modelled after Dr. Frank N. Furter has had an inherent silliness about him. Recent comics have really leaned into this, and the current era, Mr. Sinister is presented as an arch-queen who is just as likely to dish out fashion advice as he is to give a supervillain speech. Getting a little sillier isn't the only lesson Marvel should take from Invincible, though. It's impossible to discuss Invincible without discussing the show's primary villain, Omni-Man. What made Omni-Man less of a generic threat and more of a meme-worthy menace is that he showed us how truly alien his brand of evil could be. Right down to the fact that he thinks of his human wife as nothing more than a beloved pet.
I do love your mother, but she's more like a pet to me.
Historically, Marvel movies have turned every threat into the equivalent of a shallow human, including evil robots like Ultron and multiversal menaces such as Kang. There's an opportunity here for Marvel to finally do something really fresh, whether using Sinister and the X-Men or something else entirely. One of the most fascinating characters in Invincible is Atom Eve, a superhero who has the power to subatomically manipulate matter. In practicality, this lets her create almost anything she wants out of almost anything she finds. Atom Eve is creating a new template for on-screen heroes, and it's one Marvel movies should follow. When Atom Eve was given godlike powers, she didn't immediately think of how many butts she could kick. Instead, she began thinking of ways she could make life better for everyone around her, using her incredible powers. What Invincible creator Robert Kirkman seems to understand, and that Disney doesn't, is that many fans love superheroes because they dream about making the world a better place. Atom Eve wants to change the status quo by offering food and shelter to those who don't have either. Compared to her, Marvel movie heroes like Captain Marvel mostly solve problems by punching them really hard. That way of thinking could easily be applied to the X-Men, and then be contrasted with the Avengers' focus on kicking butt. We need alien menaces that make us shiver, and we need selfless heroes who make us cheer, and this needs to take place in a colourful world where anything can and does happen. All the pieces to make this work on screen are there. Marvel just has to pick them up and use them. If they do it right, Avengers vs. X-Men could eclipse the success of Endgame, and save superhero movies from following cowboy flicks into falling out for fashion. Thanks for watching, and if you like what you heard, give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more big ideas. This has been GFR.